It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Josh Singer, founder and CEO of Kognitive Marketing. Since its inception in 2006, the company has grown to over 300 full and part-time staff located in almost every major market across Canada. Currently, Kognitive is the #1 rated sales and marketing agency on Glassdoor and has been recognized as the fastest growing marketing company in the country. Due to the company's success, Josh was recently named Marketing Magazine's 30 Under 30. He is also the founder and CEO of Optimi.ai, a tech company providing a video-based plug-in to e-commerce websites to enable staff to support customers online just like they do in store. Josh enjoys running, riding his bike, and playing hockey. He's an avid traveler and a huge football fan, cheering for both the Ohio State Buckeyes and New Orleans Saints. Josh Singer, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you, Brent. I appreciate it.
It's great to hear your voice again. We got a chance to chat recently, and I'm so excited because you are our first in a series of Canadian middle market CEOs. And great to have you kick off. You've got such a terrific story, and can't wait to get into it with you on how you've started from really the founding days of Kognitive following your university. But let's just talk a little bit about the pandemic and how that's affected you, and obviously Canada. I understand that you guys are either in a lockdown or going to be into one soon. And, we're kind of experiencing that on a 50-state basis. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. Where can I go and not be in lockdown here? But how have you been holding up, your family, and how has Kognitive been doing during these interesting times?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting for sure. I think it's really funny because when I read about politics in the U.S., you'll see, I guess, people use the terms like liberals, and a lot of times it's on like almost as a bad thing. Whereas literally in Canada, the party that's running our government, it's called the Liberal Party.
Right.
So in Canada, we are very liberal in that sense. And so over the last few days, actually, almost every major province, and again, same thing as a state, just in Canada, we call it a province. Almost every province has essentially gone into as close to a full lockdown as you could get.
Wow.
And so it's almost back to where we were, almost a year ago in March.
Yeah, right.
The difference is that I think we've been through it before. So on one end, I think people didn't want to have to go backwards. Like, we've been through it. We want to move forward. So there's a little bit of that feeling of being tired and like, do we have to do this again?
Right.
But on the other end, you now have the playbook. So everyone's kind of going back to that same playbook, which has been easier, I think, this time around for everyone because we already know what's available to us. And to be honest, the Canadian government has really been super supportive, both in terms of a lot of the frontline workers are being supported through government funding programs.
Right.
Many of them are earning more with government funding than they were, just in their normal jobs.
Right.
And then businesses, there's a lot of grants and subsidy programs that exist that I think overall we've done a good job of taking care of
Helping
people.
folks out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that there aren't many people struggling, because there are, just like in the U.S. There, it's a difficult time. A lot of people are dealing with the health issues, with being locked down, and the mental health challenges that causes.
Sure. Sure.
But the government has really basically taken on the majority of
Really stepped up.
that. Yeah.
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 That's fantastic. And have you been personally affected by it? Has there been family members or, any of your key staff that has contracted it? Or have you been staying fairly, healthy and well through this whole, 9-10 months now? It's amazing to think how long
Yeah,
it's been.
I mean, none of my direct family or myself have gotten it. There's been like some of our coworkers, some of their family have gotten it.
Right. Right.
Um, we do work in retail, so
Sure.
every day a retail store has to close, or either a full of the store or a department, and the teams are notified. So we're definitely hearing it quite a bit.
Right.
Maybe we've had one case in our entire company, so we've actually been quite lucky in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
from a
great.
health perspective, we have not been impacted. Now, from
Oh,
a
that's great.
personal perspective, I would say is certainly like, a year ago, or again in March when all this happened,
Right.
it was
Right.
really scary.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think everyone didn't really know what was going to happen.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that first, call it week to 2 weeks of figuring out what was going to happen was extremely scary, because,
Right.
my first fear is, hey, if this goes on forever, or for
Yeah.
like even a
What's going to
year.
happen? Right. Right.
And, the company didn't have enough cash that we could just be paying people for a year. Like we actually went 3.5 months with zero revenue. Like we
Wow.
literally went down to zero, because we
Gosh.
staffed sales reps in big box retail stores.
Right.
So it
Nobody
literally
was
went
working.
down to zero revenue.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh my God. But luckily, the government stepped in and
Did
provided.
they? Yeah. Did you get support as well, similar to the programs down south of the
Yeah, we
border?
have a
Yeah.
75% wage subsidy for those
Wow.
people
That's
who are hit
great.
most. Means 75% of the wages up to a certain wage amount. Like a higher paid salary isn't anywhere close to 75, but
Right. Right.
they pay like 75% up to the first, 60,000, which means
Yeah. That's
45,000.
fantastic.
The first 45,000 would get covered
Yeah.
by the wage subsidy type
Right.
thing.
Well, you're the envy of most of us that live south of the border, I'll tell you.
Exactly.
The machinations that we've gone through in terms of the stimulus plans and so forth, we could spend a whole podcast on, but we won't, because that's not what we're here today to do. But I'm glad to hear that you've been healthy and well, and that your company has, obviously made it through. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get in a little later in the podcast. But let's start with you. I'd love to hear a little bit about your early years, where you grew up, and, what your early family life was like.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a suburb of Toronto, Canada,
Mm-hmm.
which is like kind of a mix between New York and Chicago.
Right. Right.
And I'm the middle child of three boys, so I have two
Right. Okay.
brothers, one older, one younger.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, to me, like it's probably the typical American joke, but I played hockey growing up.
I think
Yeah,
it's part of the credentials of being a Canadian,
literally.
right? You got to be out there doing it. I
And I would
love
say
it.
it's really interesting, but like, childhood, really is like growing up with my two brothers, going to school,
Sure.
playing a lot of hockey, playing competitive. And to me, I think, part of my foundation really comes from that team sports and hockey, and that competitive nature there
Right.
still is with me today. That
Yeah.
drive
Great.
to win. um, but I grew up in a middle income family. I was
What
in,
did Dad do? Is he a careerist or
yeah, my
accountant?
dad and my mom were both in marketing. So my dad was
Marketing.
running his own little direct marketing agency,
Okay.
and my mom was working for the Canadian Marketing Association, which is
Okay. So Dad was the entrepreneur in the family.
exactly.
Yeah, got it. Cool. And any people, or do you remember any specific things that, kind of influenced you? You obviously pursued a marketing career. You've also pursued an entrepreneurial direction. Were there things that you observed from mom and dad that, kind of led you down that field, or was it a path that you kind of cut on your own?
I think I would say is nothing stands out as my parents encouraging me. In fact, my mom will hate that I'm sharing this, but when I started this company, which is my third company, it's now close to 15 years old.
Right.
It was in my last year of college, and my mom, for the first 6 months to a year, kept on telling me to get a real job, get a real job, get a real job.
She didn't want you to go down that path.
Well, it was that, and also I started it in my last year of college, and I was
Sure.
like, oh, I'm going to be like Bill Gates, I'm going to be like Phil Knight, I'm going to be like Steve Jobs. I'm not going to finish school. I started my company in school, and I don't need to finish school. So
Right.
at first, I didn't graduate. Like I was literally half a credit. I'm like, I don't even give a crap. I'm running my company. I'm going to turn to Steve Jobs. Who needs a degree?
Right.
But my
Right.
mom really wouldn't stop saying, Josh, go finish your degree, finish your degree, finish
Yeah.
your degree.
Yeah.
And she
Good for
also
her.
kept on saying, get a job, get a job, get a job. And she won on one of those two. And it
I
was the
love it.
degree because I did not. And then eventually she's like, oh, good thing you didn't get a real job.
Good for
But
her.
it
Good
took her
for
a
her.
while to get
Get
there.
around to it. Yeah. Well, that's a typical parental reaction. I can certainly identify with that. What about, you'd mentioned Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Were there people that you either looked to for, kind of guidance and influence, or maybe mentors that were more directly involved, particularly during kind of your elementary and, middle school, high school years? Were there, folks or things that you remember from those periods of time?
Yeah, I mean, I remember one time it was probably like would have been like freshman or sophomore year in high school, and we were talking about entrepreneurship. And it's like I didn't even really know what it meant, but I'm like, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. I had no real idea what it meant. But it was like in my head, I was gonna do it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so for whatever reason, it was just that was what I was gonna
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that was kind of the path. And then my first company that I started actually happened because I applied to can't not get accepted to. One was
Mm-hmm.
like our big drugstore chain,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was our big movie theater chain.
Okay.
And both of them didn't hire me. I got the interviews, they both didn't hire me. And literally, like, I don't know how it's possible to not get hired because they basically take anyone off the street.
They probably knew you were an entrepreneur, because you presented risk to them, I suppose.
I have no idea. But anyway, so I didn't get those jobs, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I just said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to start my own gardening company.
There you go.
And I literally just created some crappy flyers on a piece of paper, like printed it off of a printer and started delivering them door to door. And the first year we only got 4 customers, but wasn't bad. And I was still only 15 years old at the
Yeah.
time. So, and when I first started cutting those lawns, it was taking forever just to walk house to house, even in my local neighborhood. Just like, if you're taking 15 minutes or 10 minutes in between houses,
Sure. Yeah.
it was annoying. So I
Yeah.
decided, like the good Canadian I am, that I decided, well, how do I speed this up? So I hopped on rollerblades, and I
Ah,
would rollerblade with a lawnmower and a weed whacker from house to house. So in
I
my
love it.
local neighborhood, cars would be driving by like, what is this kid doing? Rollerblading with a lawnmower. Like, just imagine, why would anyone rollerblade with a lawnmower? It makes no sense. But that's kind of how
Kept you going. Kept you going. Great. Was that your first entrepreneurial activity, Josh, or did you do
yes,
other things even younger than that? Yeah.
that was my first one when I
Yeah.
was
15.
15
Yeah.
years old, and I used my stepdad's lawnmower. And
Okay.
I think the first or second time I cut a customer's lawn, I destroyed the lawnmower, so I had to go buy another one.
All of a sudden, the capital investments creep in, right?
Oh my god, yeah, he wasn't too happy. But anyways, he got a new lawnmower out of it. So it
Were
was
you a good student in school? Did you keep your grades up, or? Yeah.
I did. I was school always came really easy to me. So in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, I
Right.
actually tried to do as little homework as possible, which I succeeded, and I still maintained pretty good marks. So like I was
Right.
always an A student.
And was the University of Toronto kind of your first pick for schools, and made sense to go there because of location, or was there something specific there that you wanted to go and study?
Well, you see, and this is the thing is, I didn't do any research on schools whatsoever. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, had I done my research, I probably wouldn't have gone there. So good thing that I didn't do my research. But what happened is I was running this gardening company at the time, and we had about 100 customers, and
Wow.
yeah, like the whole employees, the truck, the trailer, all the fancy
So
equipment.
you started that at 15 and then did that all the way through college as well, or
Yeah,
did you
I sold it
really?
after the first year,
Cool.
because what happened was, so when I went to college, I got accepted, but I said, okay, because I'm running this gardening company, I can't leave town because we were
Right.
still operating it. Like, although I didn't have to be there on site every day, like I
Sure.
just didn't
Sure.
feel comfortable. Unfortunately, remote work wasn't in place back then. So I said, okay, I have to go to Toronto. So I applied to all three schools.
Got it.
University of Toronto had a great reputation,
Yeah.
and I didn't do any research, and I just went to university. I got into all three, and I just said, okay, I'm going to U of T. And then
Right.
when I got there, I realized how like it wasn't like I was expecting all these crazy parties and all this fun. And I made sure I did that, but um, it was a lot more education focused and
Is
less
UT
social.
more of a commuter school in the sense that people live at home and attend there, or do they have a dorm life and
They
a
have a good,
and a
and
student
I
life?
actually
Yeah.
moved into the dorms, and some of
Did
my
you?
best friends, one lives in Boston now, and he's from the States, and the other
Right.
one lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan,
Uh-huh.
also
Uh-huh.
from the States. So
Yeah.
I love Americans. My mom is American. And so actually, when I walked into my dorm the first day of school, and I saw an American flag draped over one thing, I literally started screaming. I'm like, yes! I was so happy. I'm like, I got an American roommate. It was amazing. And it was a match made in heaven. So
Oh, that's great.
fantastic.
Terrific. Terrific. Wonderful. And so you studied commerce. Was that again a choice, or was that something
Yeah.
that yeah. So
Because
kind
like
of
I
decided
knew
you
I
wanted
was
your
going
business
into
degree.
business. I knew I
Right.
was going to be a
Right.
business guy. Don't ask me why. I literally don't know why.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
like probably because both my parents were in marketing. I'm like, I knew I was going to be in
Sure.
business, and I'm just like, it's practical. Like if I'm going into business, why wouldn't I just take business as like
Of
my
course.
degree
Yeah.
type thing?
Yeah. So you sold the gardening business. Did you
Yeah.
have odd jobs or start another business while you were in school? Tell us a little bit about how that developed and finally, of course, got into cognitive, because I think you started cognitive marketing when you were a senior, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
what happened was after going into what we call Frosh Week, I don't know what they call it in the States, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just like
You're
a
freshman. Yeah.
massive party.
Right.
And I'm just like, wow, this is way too much fun. I'm like, I don't want to have to, because I lived about 45 minutes out of school.
Okay.
And a few days a week I'd have to go and oversee like our gardening operation. So like some days I'm not working, some days I was. I'm just like, I don't want to be driving back and doing work after school. I'm like, I want to be partying. I want
Sure.
to be chasing girls. I want to be doing all the fun stuff. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. So that's why I decided to sell it. And it
Right.
wasn't a massive exit, but from a, college student perspective, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
And then, so that was after my freshman year.
Right.
And then, so for after the sophomore year, I had a job for 1 year, like one summer as an intern. And our large Canadian chain, which is like equivalent of like a Target or a Walmart, is called Canadian Tire. And
Mm-hmm.
same thing as
Right.
like a big box retailer. And I got a job at their corporate head office for one summer.
Okay. Right.
And
What
go
did
on.
that entail? What were you in kind
Well,
of
in
multi?
interim at their office for the first month, I literally was myself and one other co-op that we were counting this contest program where like a
Oh.
scratch and win
Huh.
these cards. And it was like program was called Gas for Life because they also have their own sort of gas stations.
Right.
And literally, I remember my boss coming in after like 3 weeks and he's like, you got to slow down because
You're going to get
these,
all the work done.
these are going to be done. Like this has to last you the whole summer.
Little summer. Oh gosh.
I said, Adrian, you better, you better find me work because there's no way I'm doing this all summer. So go find me work. That's what I
I was
said.
going to ask you how quickly you got bored there. So
Oh my
it
God.
come
And
on pretty
that's what
quickly.
happened. Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a great job. Like most people would love it. It paid quite well. But the reality is I got home at 5 and I had no pressure, no worries, nothing.
Right.
And I was bored. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
Sure.
now I know I definitely cannot work for someone else. Only from the sense of it was, it's not like I didn't enjoy it. It's just there wasn't that challenge. And I
Sure.
actually missed having that pressure, that challenge of like, what do I need to do?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was for 1 year. And
Yeah.
then did you go right into another job, or did cognitive marketing kind of, peak up in that last year, and that's what you've been doing since?
Yeah. So what happened was then I started a second lawn company that was focused
Oh,
on enhancement. So the first company
okay.
was about lawn maintenance, so mowing the lawn, turning the beds, cutting the shrubs type thing. The
Right.
second one was all about how do we make your lawn look beautiful. So think about
Hmm.
fertilizer, seeding, sodding,
Interesting.
just making it actually look nicer.
Yeah.
And I did that for one summer
Hmm.
and went okay, like not great to be honest. And we were planning this whole massive expansion for the year two. And then that's when I started this cognitive marketing.
Yeah.
And the way that was started was I was in a fraternity and I was the guy that was throwing the parties. So
Hmm.
I always tell people I was like Van Wilder, except not nearly as cool. Okay. The guy throwing the party, but I wish I was as cool as him. Like if I could lie to people and say that, that would be great. But truth be told, I was not nearly as cool, but I did throw some really great parties.
Hmm.
And so what happened was I had thrown a few different parties for our frat, and in Canada, frat life isn't as big. So we actually threw them in nightclubs.
Right.
And one time we threw a party, and my good friend, his family started Mac Cosmetics, which is like the big cosmetics brand that now
Uh-huh.
owned
Yep.
by Estee Lauder. And I'm like, Brett, like just hook me up for free makeup. We'll give it away to all the girls that come to the party. Like just make it happen. Anyways, so what they would do is they have a program where the parties actually all proceeds went to charity. And so I actually got $30,000 worth of
Wow.
free makeup to give away to all the girls.
Yeah.
Or no, it may have been like even like 150,000. It was insane.
Wow.
And so that time we threw that party, we got over double the number of people to that party, to our next closest party we'd ever thrown. It was a huge success, the energy, everything. And that's when I'm like, oh my God, like they're like people are actually coming to a party just to be advertised to because people literally came for the MAC Cosmetics.
Hmm.
Like that's why they came. I'm like, there's a whole opportunity because like who likes watching ads? Like no
Right.
one. I'm like, but this is an advertising that people actually want to consume. I'm
Yeah.
like, I can
Exactly.
turn a whole company by taking nightclub parties, turn them into trade shows as a way to advertise to students.
Hmm.
And that's actually
Wow.
how our company was initially formed was off of that.
Yeah. Fantastic. So really a real life sampling type of an exercise, right? Is that kind of what it became?
And what we did is we created immersive experience where the theme of the activities in that party would resonate with a brand message. So
Yeah.
an example was like L'Oreal Professionnel did a whole hair salon showcasing their hair products, but then we had professional hairstylists, we had a photo shoot, like a model style photo shoot. People could walk down the
That's awesome.
runway. They had the fan blowing their hair while they're taking
Wow.
pictures. So and that was up on stage. That feeling of that, almost making people feel like they were a model as
It's
part
an
of
experience. Yeah.
that.
A real
Exactly.
experience. Great. And so, how did you monetize that then? How did that kind of develop into a business?
Yeah, so basically, we partnered with different student groups, and they essentially made money for promoting the party and getting the people to the door, and then we made money off the sponsors.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's
Cool.
the way it started, but we
Yeah.
quickly evolved because it's a lot of work to organize these big events. And hey, if we're really making our money off the sponsors, we then evolved to really taking sponsors and bringing them to existing events. So we didn't have
Right.
to work like this way. We're still making the same money from the sponsors, but we weren't responsible for putting on the whole event, the logistics, all that planning. Rather just go to existing events rather than have to
Yeah.
also put on your whole new events.
Yeah. Cool. Great. And when did you hire your first employee?
Or it would have been like even before we threw the first party. I
Yeah.
started it with one individual, and then very quickly we had for the when this company started was four people immediately were getting paid almost
Right.
like immediately, and then it just grew from there. And we've
Yeah.
evolved, quickly. And yeah, there's been I think a few different evolutions this time.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. So, graduate from school. This is already kind of up and running, and
Yeah.
it's kind of evolving, obviously, from kind of the party sampling to what? I mean, what was kind of the first big, kind of aha moment when you either got a contract or a big commitment, and you said, "Wow, I can really build something out of this."
Yeah, so the first bigger contract we got, which was when we did this like campus ambassador program, which is really bringing, the sponsors to the events, was with Rogers Wireless. They're the equivalent of like your
Sure.
AT&T
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
States. And so really, again, we focused on not just parties, but any sort of campus event, and how do we bring that brand message to life inside those events.
Right.
And we were doing that with them. And then, again, we did get a break, which was one of our biggest clients even today, which, Canadian Tire, which is that brand that I work with for
Right.
one summer, they offered us the ability to run a sales program in their big box retail store
Ah, cool.
in the worst, the coldest, most freezingest, like the harshest conditions you could imagine. They're like, go out to this province called Saskatchewan, which is just north of North
Oh my
Dakota.
gosh. Oh yeah.
Of
The
North
upper
Dakota. So
Midwest.
you
Yeah.
think about
Oh my
like
gosh.
that freezing cold, and they're like, no one's covering that region. So if you want it, you could have it. And it was like everything else was covered. Like, sure, you could take it. And that was really running sales programs, which was a little different, but very similar. So, our business was really around staffing these promotional reps at different events. And
Right.
we were then staffing these promotional reps, but inside their retail store and selling different products and services there.
Right. Right.
And so
Cool.
that was our big break. We sent out a partner and an employee, and we're like, yeah, they'll be back in like a couple weeks, and didn't come back. Then we had to send more people out. Then we had to send, next thing you know, like all the key management was there. And that actually was in 2008, which was the
Oh yeah.
the financial crisis.
Right. Right.
So at that point, kind of leading up to it, we got to a point where just with everything going on, it was like we basically pitched, a flag in and said, "This is our make or break. This is our burning the boats. We either make it off this or
Right.
the company's done." Essentially,
Yeah.
that was our thing. So it was like there's no going back. It's like we had to make it work, and it was an extremely difficult program.
Mm.
People were out for again extended periods of time. I ended up being out there for 4 or 5 months in
Wow.
the most freezing cold weather there was.
Oh goodness.
And we were all working as long as we were awake. So there was like no weekends. There was no
Right.
things. So basically, you're working around the clock.
Wow.
And we lost people along the way. And what I mean by we lost people along the way, I mean I
They
literally
didn't die.
they didn't die. Like, screw this. I am gone.
They moved on to other
I'm
opportunities.
done. I didn't. I don't hate myself enough to do this. I'm out. So we lost. A minority partner at the time who's now running a really successful real estate tech business in California. And some key employees were like, screw this, I'm gone.
Right.
But we made it through. And coming on the other end, that really, we really honed in on our ability to run, retail sales programs where we're staffing and managing the programs.
Yeah.
And that's where we like for, call it 10 years, that was like a sole focus of ours.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, fast forward to today, you've been almost 15 years, I guess, coming up on 15 years in business. And, how would you kind of, describe the business today? Who do you serve? What's the market? And, give us a little bit of an overview of, how that business has evolved.
Yeah. So today, what I would say is that we're a retail tech company.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is ultimately we provide technology to help retailers increase their sales revenue and their profitability. So we still have the staffing business, and that's being powered by a workforce management technology we've built.
Okay.
And so we sell that technology to third parties, so to retailers, and we're also leveraging it ourselves. Essentially, what that does is that automates the entire life cycle.
Their hiring process then of those
hiring,
reps?
onboarding,
right,
digitally done, all automated, training through video, through digital like learning, scheduling, payroll, communications, motivation, So everything, if you think about everything that you typically do manually in managing these frontline staff, our system automates it.
Wow, that's great.
And so
And that's like a subscription service. Is that how that works? Or?
That's how that works. Yeah. And so what was happening is we started that probably now close to 5 years ago.
Wow.
And that was, the idea was we're going to build it off of our internal company. So our internal company funded it. And then we're going to build it for a company to use, but with the idea that we'd start selling it to third parties.
Right.
And so our COVID partial pivot, let's say we went 45 degrees, was really to like really speed that up even further. So we brought our like product roadmap up 2 years in the first 3 to 4 months of COVID. We just said, let's repurpose a bunch of people, focus on developing that quicker and move that further ahead. So part one of our COVID pivot, which is like 45 degrees, was to just speed up the development of that.
Right. Cool.
The second part of that is the other tool that we have for our retail tech, which is a plugin to e-commerce websites that enables video chat. And so the whole idea is if you're shopping online, how can you get that support of a real salesperson just like you do in the physical shopping experience?
Right. So not just a chat or an audio, it's actually a video of someone sitting in a call center, right? And assisting them through the buying process.
Including they could actually navigate the screen for you. They could help you find the right products. They could answer your questions. They could, help actually then add products to your cart on your behalf.
Yeah.
So when you go in physical retail, typically that, if you're supported, they're going to walk you up. They're going to showcase different things. They'll help you through the process. And we believe that same experience should be online.
And is it a two-way video opportunity with those folks?
It is at the customer's discretion.
Right? So they can choose.
The video is turned off for the customer to start as the default setting, but through conversation, the rep could educate the customer saying, if you would like to turn on your video, here's the button to do so.
Right.
But it's completely up to the customer to decide what they want to do.
Yeah. Cool. Great. And how is the business split today then between those various segments?
Yeah. So really, I mean, we kind of almost put like one in like pure tech, which is pure SaaS. And then the other one is our staffing, which is powered by our workforce management tool.
Yeah.
So we kind of, it actually, we had them all as we had multiple different entities. In COVID, we just brought them all together into one entity.
Right.
And they're basically operating as like two standalone divisions within one corporate entity.
Yeah. Cool. And how many total employees today, including kind of your corporate staff?
It's a good question. We're probably at, my guess is somewhere between 300 to 400. And the reason being is just in COVID, our volumes are still substantially down.
Of course.
And again, if I answer you in a week, it's going to be substantially lower because as these lockdowns are happening live in real time in Canada, there's less and less staff, and then it will ramp up. We will get beyond our pre-COVID levels once full vaccine is out. But until that time, it's definitely like there's some clients that are just not staffing or reduced staffing. So
So are they contract workers? In the U.S., we'd call them like 1099s, right? In other
these
words,
are full employees.
Oh, they're full employees.
They're full employees,
and you can turn that on and turn that off fairly easily.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, again, the Canadian government really stepped in, my opinion, and so they're allowing employers to essentially furlough your employees, and they then get supported.
They cover the 75% of
Well, actually, and some of them will end up making more. Then there's a separate government program where you get paid a flat $500 a week.
Right.
And so imagine if you were earning minimum wage and you weren't working that much. And then all of a sudden you could go and say, hey, I'm getting this $500 a week thing. Like some people are doing better. Now, again, there are people that, are struggling. So I don't want to minimize that, but it certainly makes it easier for everyone that the government's stepping in and supporting.
You start in those early days with just one or two employees during your college, period of time in your party organization and sampling, and gosh, up to 300-400 now. Do you have a corporate staff as well? Do you how are you kind of organized around that? And tell us a little bit about how that looks like.
We were really ahead of this virtual work. In fact, we had planned to already get rid of our office as of July of this year. So when they reached out, at the beginning of the year before COVID, we're like, we're not renewing. As part of our budget, we weren't renewing. And the reason being is, again, we have staff all across the country, and Canada is just as big as the US. We just have a fraction of the population. So we were already doing the remote work. We were on Microsoft Teams. Everything was up in the cloud. We had chat-based technology through our own system that we were constantly using. And we had already moved to the whole remote work world.
Right.
So when COVID hit, the only thing that changed is we said, you know what? We like Zoom better than Teams. So we switched to Zoom, but otherwise everything really stayed the same.
Yeah, great. And so do you have a typical structure, like head of finance, head of marketing, kind of the typical kind of organization structure that sits with you there in Toronto or remotely, I guess? Mm-hmm.
And what we had also done is our entire finance team is actually overseas. So we had outsourced our entire department for finance. Some of our recruiting was also done overseas.
Sure.
And then some of our development is done overseas as well for our technology development. So we had already done that. So what we have is, your typical corporate structure. What we had been doing is, as we leveraged our technology, it's really interesting because when we, at one point, we won the Jobs Growth Award in the Top 500 for the most jobs created in a 5-year period, which is we grew by 26 times. And that was when we were all manual based. Like everything we were doing was manual based. And then the whole shift to automation, as well as actually, rather than adding on more employees where it makes sense, we were already shifting resources to appropriate places. So what we have is a core team, probably around, I would say at this point, maybe 50 corporate head office type staff.
Yeah.
And the rest are either, again, either through like automation or outsourcing to the right key partners.
Right. Well, you started this business obviously in your early 20s as you came out, and you're 15 years along, and you've had to really learn leadership, on the job, and share with us a little bit about some of those lessons learned, and maybe some of the tough situations you've been in and gone through, and what you've learned from it, and how your leadership's evolved over that time.
Oh my God.
We'd have a podcast around that.
Oh God, how much time do we have?
About 5 minutes left.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So Cole's notes. What I would say is one of the biggest things was that, it's kind of that the saying, the younger you are, the more you think It's like the more you know, the less you don't know type thing. So at the beginning, I felt like I knew it all and everything was.
Well, and to be honest, you've been running a business since you were 15, right? I mean, by the time you had 1,000 customers, you probably had 40 or 50 people working for you, and guys out there mowing and so forth. So, you had some management experience.
Yeah. And so for sure. And I think, that's where, our first growing pains is we had tripled in size year over year, doubled in size year over year, 3 years in a row. So from the previous year, we doubled, then we doubled again from that point to that. And again, on a manual based business where it's very labor intensive, that's not easy to do. One of the biggest learnings was we actually fell behind the growth curve, meaning we didn't have enough senior leadership and we were all playing catch up. And so that's where we had some severe growing pains. Right. And ultimately, again, the core of that probably was the ego, right? Of thinking I knew it all. And the reality is I had to learn the hard way. We had some growing pains, which was it was painful to operate the business just because we weren't operating as effectively. And I was overworked. It was actually not fun at all. Results weren't as great. And trying to operate a business when it's not operating well is not fun at all. And I think if I had been, now that I've kind of learned what I've learned, if I could go back and do it differently, I would have had a great, advisory board. I probably would have hired some people who are way smarter than me earlier on, who had probably run businesses already of that size and had known how to set up the right IT infrastructure, right? The right org structure, leadership, how to operate bigger businesses. And you just don't know what you don't know. So things were operating great until they weren't operating great.
Right.
And then when they're
Then
not
you do it
operating
over
great,
again.
it's like, holy crap. Like, I remember we had payroll issues. Because we were doing it all off Excel, and all these people were complaining, hey, I got underpaid. So there was a whole mess online of like these online reviews of, we're getting underpaid, which wasn't intentional. And yet on the
Right.
flip side, all the people that were getting overpaid, which there were tons of people that were getting overpaid, weren't complaining online. It was
Exactly.
just, we had screwed up, right? And we didn't set up the systems to be at that scale. And so no one was really getting paid right. So the people who weren't getting paid, which we had to fix right away, they got paid. The people who were overpaid, good luck in getting a good chunk of that money back.
Yeah,
You know
right.
what I mean?
Right.
So I think that biggest learning of knowing, I think, and still today, I still have to improve on that, but I've
Yeah.
made some drastic changes. Just knowing that I don't know, and that there's
Yeah.
people that are better than you. And I think
Right.
I've learned that. Where I want to take it even further is really, still to a certain extent, that competitive nature in me growing up of wanting to win, wanting to be the best is like,
Sure.
I think the best leaders are ones where you literally put yourself aside for the cause.
Right.
And that means it doesn't really matter about you being the best. It's about your impact. It's
That's right.
about the cause and what you're trying to do in the world. And I think
Yeah.
I still can improve a little bit. I think I've grown a long way, but on really like taking myself out of the equation
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I actually think it does serve you in terms of happiness and ultimately getting to what you want further is when it's not about you. It's
Yeah.
about the cause, about the team, about what you're trying to accomplish.
How do you decide if it's time to, micromanage someone or stay out of their sandbox and let them fidget and figure it out?
Yeah, well, what I would say is a couple things, and again, learning the hard way. We used to hire people who had no idea what they were doing, and we would train them up from the
Right.
start. We have a
Right.
whole methodology. We combine, the old school situational leadership with our way of teaching, and we have TEACH as an acronym of how to teach anything.
Mm. Hmm.
But essentially, now what I've learned is really it's actually about hiring people who could do a better job than you can. So the first thing is really actually about recruitment. And Brent, obviously,
Sure.
you understand that is like,
Yeah.
hey, if I could actually start, and the best college football, basketball programs, they all get it. Like the reason why they're so great isn't because the coaches are so great, which they are, but it starts with recruiting. And even
That's
they
right.
know that, right? So
Yeah.
number one is recruiting and having the great team members on board. Then really it's the situational leadership. The more you know something, the more space we could give, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not going to go through that whole model here, but essentially to me it's like if I feel comfortable that you know it all, then I'm going to give you a lot of space. I'll hold you accountable to the results, but I'm going to you do it in your own way. And
Right.
really it's coaching through you and through your knowledge and helping you more on the mental side of things and helping you see things that you might not see and supporting
Hmm.
you through it. Now, if you're struggling, that's where you are a lot more hands-on and supportive. And to be
Right.
honest, I used to micromanage a lot. I don't like to. And from a very selfish standpoint, I don't want to do more work than I have to
Of course.
from
Yeah.
one end.
Yeah.
And on the other end, from to me, one of my key purposes in life is, fulfillment through self-worth to help people achieve what matters most to them.
Right.
And so
Right.
helping people learn and grow and improve their self-worth to actually achieve
Yeah.
is what brings me joy. So when I support my
Yeah.
team and I coach them and they grow, that's extremely rewarding to me as well.
Yeah. Cool. What do you personally look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire at Cognitive Marketing?
Yeah, I would say so. When I'm doing my hiring,
Yeah.
there's a few things. So number one will be, again, I'm in that sense, I want to hire someone that's better than me. And
Hmm.
luckily, as being the CEO, I actually could choose anyone that works for me. I have that ultimate decision.
Yeah.
And so one of the things is saying, looking at their past results, is it safe to assume that, like, basically whatever they tell you doesn't make any difference in terms of what they could do? Their past, you have to use past as an indicator of the future. So does the past give you evidence that they could do this job, either
Sure.
because they've already done it or because they've been doing it at a lower level but they're ready to step up? So
Right.
that's number one. Number two, I'm going to look at culture fit. So we actually rank them based on our values. We look at ask them questions, how they act, to see, hey, do they fit those values? And then another thing is really that kind of like that humble, wanting to learn and grow, because
humble and hungry.
Exactly. Because when they come in and they feel like they know it all, and that attitude, like, I don't want that. I don't want politics in my company. I don't want that attitude. I want everyone to, like, I'm going to get more joy if I could actually support someone. And so part of my question is like, is this someone as an individual I could rally behind? Can I actually feel good about investing in this individual?
Yeah, cool. Well, we're just about out of time, Josh, but we have a couple other questions. And, obviously looking toward a post-COVID, vaccinated COVID world, and who knows how long that'll take, maybe another year or so. But, you've already talked about how much of a remote change that you've made at Kognitive. What other kind of changes do you see ahead for your business, or, kind of for the industry as a whole, particularly the customers that you serve?
Yeah, I mean, again, to me, everything is digital at this point. I think, e-commerce, there's recently read a Forbes article saying e-commerce has grown, like, in terms of like dollars spent through e-commerce 4 to 6 years.
Oh, it's incredible.
Over this time period. And I think that digital evolution is only going to pick up steam. So might it go back a little bit as people could go around? Yes, but I think more and more customers and businesses are thinking, how do we interact digitally? So, from a work perspective, that's an internal. That's like, hey, how do we collaborate digitally? And from a business perspective and going outbound to your customers, your partners, it's all digital. So that's why, like, right now, 90% of our focus is really on that digital, and how do we support companies in digitally interacting with their customers.
Right. Yeah. Big change ahead. Terrific. Well, lastly, what kind of career and life advice would you give someone that maybe has their eyes on the corner office, or perhaps wants to be an entrepreneur like you and, continue their career? And what would you tell someone that maybe is 10, 15 years behind you?
Yeah, I would say it's so interesting, but like, when I look at, if someone wants to be a CEO, you need to almost, it's the saying is like, dress the part. I don't really care about dressing the part, but act like a CEO. Meaning, when you think about what's in the best interest of the company, and when you think about from a P&L perspective and how certain decisions impact the company. Like, when you start acting like a CEO, that's when people start taking you seriously. And so whether you are, whether C-level or VP level, and you're, reporting into a CEO, or even if you're lower down, when you start just thinking like that leader, I think that's where you're going to get the opportunities to move up and eventually do that. From an entrepreneurial perspective, I mean, it's so easy to say, but, taking that first step, what is the smallest step you could take? And generally for me, the biggest piece of advice is writing a business plan in bullet form. Once people, like, I've probably helped at least 20 different people in some way, shape, or form start their businesses. The best advice that I always give, because it gets them started, is write a business plan, and not this fancy business plan for the purpose of going out to investors, but it forces you to answer questions that ultimately basically tell you what you need to do to get started. And so by doing that basic business plan, which is really just bullet points, because it doesn't matter about how it looks, it just matters about forcing you to answer the questions. If it's the right thing, you're going to know everything you need. Like, people's biggest question is like, what do I do next? How do I do this? Write the plan. It'll tell you everything you need to know.
Right. Terrific. Well, Josh Singer, CEO and founder of Kognitive Marketing, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.